So we're just going to go ahead and get started. And if anyone else joins the call, not a problem. And then we'll be able to open up at the end and take any questions or comments or anything like that. So I definitely want to thank everyone for taking the time to join this call. And if you are new to my calls, I do a free call every month, and these calls are designed to help your business grow. The calls are on the third Tuesday of every month. And so this month we're going to talk about consistency. And it's kind of fitting, I suppose, because I am supposed to be doing these calls every month, and I actually took a couple of months off. For anyone who doesn't know, I recently had a baby, and I was trying to keep everything going with the new baby, and it wasn't happening. And so I came back, and of course, I come back on the month that's about consistency. So, so sometimes even when you know what you're supposed to be doing, actually doing it is key, and that's what makes all the difference. So so this month is about consistency. So I am going to kind of jump right in, and let's talk about what it looks like to be consistent and why it's important, and how we work on being consistent in our actions, and in particular, how this ties back into our business. So whatever you do consistently or repeatedly is basically who you are. It basically what that really means is your habits, what you do on a consistent basis, forms who you are. Not what you want to be doing, not what you think you're doing, not what you say you're going to be doing, but what you're actually doing is really the testament or what makes up who you are. So I feel like we all kind of know someone who starts and stops in almost everything they do. And it doesn't really matter, how big their aspirations are. It doesn't matter what they want to accomplish. What we see and what we know about that person at the end of the day is that they tend to start and stop. And so we know that person is consistent at being inconsistent. And that might even be you. You might be that person. And so I just want us to focus in for a moment on what it looks like when we think about that person. Do we have a high opinion of them? Do we feel like they're reliable? What is our overall outlook on a person who we know doesn't actually follow through with what they say they're going to do? And so oftentimes that outlook on that person is usually not a good outlook. And so if we are that person, just consider what other people may be thinking or looking at when they see us. Do they see someone who they know is going to follow through? Do they see someone who they know is going to actually complete a task or stay on track or follow through with a commitment, so on and so forth? So I just want to kind of leave that at the back of your head, because ultimately, when we're talking about growing our business and talking about some of the areas or the ways that we may be inconsistent, we want to remember what it looks like when we see someone else who's inconsistent and the impression that they make on us, because we want to make sure that that's not the impression that we're leaving on others. And in particular, when we're running a business, we want to make sure that's not the impression we're leaving on our customers or our clients or our suppliers or our vendors, right? And consistency isn't just a key factor in business. It's really anywhere in life. It's in your relationships, it's in your health, in your fitness, it's in your finances, in any new skill or area that you really want to develop and grow in your life. A routine is what you basically want to implement. And of course, that also flows into your business. So I just want to make sure that even though this call is kind of focused in on business, that consistency isn't just about being consistent in your business. It's really about being consistent in every area of your life that you want to see thrive and that you want to see grow. So we'll get into a little bit about building a new habit, which is one of the key areas in inconsistency. It takes mental and physical and sometimes even emotional efforts to build a habit. When you're really working on something that's passionate for you and you know that it's hard, you know that it's an important area in your life, there is definitely an emotional tie to that. And especially if you feel like you're really trying and you're not able to, or you're not seeing headway in how, or in being consistent, you can definitely get emotional about that. I know that for me, just on a personal note, sometimes that's in my personal appearance. This right now, not that I feel like I'm huge, but I'm definitely the heaviest that I've ever been in my life. And granted, I had a baby this year, so I can always use the baby as an excuse, but I'm not really an excuse making type of person. So from that standpoint, I have been working really hard this year to try and get myself back in shape. And it's been a very rocky and emotional ride, especially if you're an emotional eater like me. So when I'm stressed out, or when, the baby is keeping me up, I naturally go to eat. And then I look up at myself the next morning and I'm like, see, this is how you'll never get back in shape. Then that's when the negative self-talk starts, and so on and so forth. So I definitely want to acknowledge that being consistent, in particular, of areas that are really important to you and areas that you want to see grow, can be a frustrating thing, and it can have that physical, that mental, and that emotional drain, because it takes all of those areas of effort to make this happen. But we will get back into habit formation. So I want to point out and start off by stressing that we often give up before we see a breakthrough. We give up before we have reached our sweet spot. We don't let our plans really take time to manifest and to, really grow, and it's kind of like when you plant that seed. We know that when you plant a seed, you're not going to see those immediate results. You have to water it, and, it has to have sunshine and take time for you to really see that plant sprout. Or you might see the plant sprout out, but it hasn't grown into the full maturity of what that plant is supposed to be, because that takes time. So a lot of times what happens is that when we are trying to be consistent, we just don't reach that sweet spot, or we stop rather before we reach that sweet spot. And that is obviously one area that we want to focus in on with the consistency, is that you have to be consistent for long enough to see the results. Long enough to see the results. That's very key. So I want to really talk about what consistency is. Consistency means providing predictable and reliable results. In the case of business, this means that you're going to provide those results to every customer or client every time you do business with them. That is what it means to be consistent, that your client knows every time they do business with you what to expect, how this is going to run, what kind of results they're going to get. If you sell a product, they know that your quality, the quality or the standard of your product is going to be the same every time they buy it. Consistency is going to help you simplify how you operate, eliminate unnecessary overhead, eliminate duplication. It's going to help eliminate delays and trying to rework out, a situation often. So it's ultimately, I guess, consistency to me is kind of like the cornerstone, or definitely a part of a major part of the framework for how you build a scalable business, right? So you build a system, you're consistent in it, your customers know what to expect, you continue to build that system out consistently, and you start to see that growth, and you build to scale based on having those same consistent, reliable, predictable results. So what consistency is not being the best at something. And so I really want to stress that, because we definitely shop or frequent places, or maybe do business with someone who we know we're not getting the best product. We might not be getting the best service, but we know exactly what to expect. So I'm going to use McDonald's as an example. We know by no means necessary does McDonald's produce the best hamburger. They just don't. To me, their hamburgers are horrible. I haven't eaten McDonald's in a couple of years, but McDonald's, not the best hamburger. However, if you go to McDonald's, you know exactly what to expect. You know what's going to be on the burger. You know how quick your burger is going to come out. You pretty much know what it's going to taste like. You know how you're going to feel afterwards. Like, you know what to expect. So being consistent is not being the best. It's just making sure that your results are predictable, right? So So I just want to also keep that in mind, because I think sometimes when we think about how we grow out our business, and not to say that we don't want to be the best. One of the things that McDonald's is the best at is they're the best at having a system, right? But they're not the best at producing the best hamburger. So, knowing what that consistency looks like doesn't necessarily always mean the best. So, what happens, let's say, if you go to the gym today? What happens if you work really, really hard at the gym? You work hard for 4 or 5 hours today at the gym today. What are you going to see when you get back to the mirror? You're still going to see the same you, maybe the same you that's really sweaty, maybe the same you that, with your hair frazzled or whatever the case might be. But what you're not going to see is you're not going to see yourself be more toned, and you're not going to see yourself be any thinner. And that's because going to the gym takes more consistency than that one day, right? So you have to work at it several times a week for several weeks before you see any results. And then in addition to that, you have to assess other factors that might impede your progress. So what happens if you have been going very consistently to the gym 4 times a week for, let's just say, I don't know, 8 or 9 weeks? Then you should expect to see some results at that point. So what happens if you don't see results? Before you rule out the fact that the gym does or doesn't work, what you might have to look at is, what are you eating? What is your diet? You might have to take into consideration what your routine is. Let's say if you're a big guy and you're using 10 or 12 pound weights, then you could have gone to the gym for, 8 weeks, 4 times a week. That doesn't mean you're going to see any consistency because you're using a weight that's not appropriate for your size, right? So being consistent will also help you take a look at some of the other factors around what you're doing, to make sure that you're not just being consistent, but you're being consistent in the right things. I hope I said that clearly. So I want to segue here, because this actually leads me into the first of my points that I want to make sure that you leave with. And that is, what is really the power in being consistent? Consistency allows you to measure. It allows you to measure what it is that you're doing or not doing and how that's working. So again, just kind of using this gym experience, if you know that you should be able to see results after 8 weeks of consistently working out and you're not seeing those results, now you have the ability to go back and measure and take a look at other peripherals and things like that that are happening around your actions to see, are you doing the right things consistently? And you're able to track your progress based off of what you should be seeing by that time frame. So, it basically allows you to determine whether or not something is working. If, let's say, you started a newsletter, and maybe you have a purpose for your newsletter. Your purpose might be, keeping in contact with your clients. Maybe it's promoting your monthly specials. Maybe it's a venue to release your content, your blogs, or your affiliate links out to your customers on a regular basis. So you start a newsletter. You have a purpose behind your newsletter that you are starting. Your goal is to release a newsletter once a month for 12 months. But what happens if you've only released it 5 months? And not even 5 months in a row? What happens if you released it like in January, and then you release it again in March, and then again in August and September, and then October, but then you don't release another one until December? So when you look back over your 12 months, you don't see the results that you want. Why is that? Is it that the newsletter itself isn't working? Or is it because your customers couldn't expect it on a regular basis? They didn't know when they were going to get it. They weren't really quite sure what you were doing, right? Because it was coming so sporadically that they couldn't quite gauge what this was. Maybe it didn't have time to pick up any traction. So there's a number of different ways that releasing your newsletter in that instance without having that consistency wouldn't allow you to accurately gauge what your results are. So then you give up. You give up because you feel like this doesn't work. But is it that the newsletter doesn't work, or is it that you weren't consistent? So consistency allows you to measure your actions. Okay, so this leads me straight into your reputation. As I mentioned, let's say if you did this in this very sporadic way, your customers have no clue what you're trying to do. So they're getting a random newsletter here and there. At the end of your newsletter, it says, look out for our edition next month. Next month, they don't see anything. They're like, what is going on? I don't understand. So, so if you're, I kind of, led on with this in the beginning of the call. If you're consistent with being inconsistent, then you lose, and that can definitely damage your reputation. So on the flip side of that, just to really give parent and really get full spectrum, if you're very consistent all the time, expect, and that helps to build your reputation. So consistency can either hurt you, or let me say lack of consistency can hurt you, but consistency can also really boost your reputation. So there's two sides to that. And you got to kind of pick, as a business owner, which side do you want to be on? And I know that question is really obvious, but what side do you want to be on? Do you want to hurt your reputation or build it? So just consider that your reputation, that consistency leads into your reputation. So the last one that I will kind of get in here on, in terms of the power behind being consistent, is that consistency tells you what consistency tells the world really what you're all about. So it tells the world how to respond to you, how to treat you based off of your own actions. So what you treat as important, your team is going to treat as important. What you allow to continuously slip, your team is going to allow to continuously slip. When someone doesn't, when someone that doesn't have the tendency to follow through, then it lessens the pressure on you to keep up your end of a bargain if you don't believe that they're going to keep up their end of the bargain, right? So if you find, for instance, that people tend to give you kind of half-hearted commitments, maybe it's because they don't really expect for you to follow up or follow through. So I think, just considering some of those options, those ideas when we get into the power of consistency, is really what I want to get across here. So I'm going to recap that before we move on. Consistency allows you to measure your progress. Okay, consistency improves or destroys your reputation, and consistency tells the world how to interact with you. Those are the three key takeaways that I want you to get from what we just talked about. Measures your progress, improves or destroys your reputation, and tells the world how to interact with you. Okay, so let's look at how consistency touches pretty much every part of your business. It touches on your products and services. If you are inconsistent with how your products and services are rendered to your customers, and they have no idea what to expect, they're less likely to come back. So I alluded again to not necessarily having the best product, but having a consistent product. If I know what I'm getting, I can make a determination on whether I feel that this is worth my time or my money, and I can still come back. If I don't know what I'm getting, if I am paying you $20 for a widget, and this time the widget is really good and the next time the widget is really bad, I'm not going to spend my $20 with you again, because I don't know if I'm getting a good or a bad widget. You have to be consistent with your customers. I guess let's think about it like this. Have you ever just dreaded dealing with a certain company because you knew that you were going to have long wait times, or that their automated system was going to be all types of messed up? Like, I know dealing with utility companies, or I don't know, even today I ended up being on a call for like 45 minutes with the water company in Detroit. It was just absolutely crazy. And so you hate dealing with businesses like that. So on the same note, you can probably also think of at least a business that you love their service, right? And when you think about, someone says, hey, do you know a good hair salon? I don't know. And your hair salon has excellent service. They're always on time. The appointments run smoothly. You know exactly what to expect. You probably rave about them. You tell somebody about them. So that kind of ties into that reputation thing, is that, you can have customers who either dread having to deal with you or who love having to deal with you. And your consistency with how you deal with your customers is going to lead into how they feel about that. Also dealing with employees, right? So your products and services, your customers, and your employees. If you have employees in your business, have you ever worked for a company where you had a policy that was either sometimes enforced, not always enforced, you weren't quite sure what to expect? I remember this one company that I worked for, I used to wear jeans all the time. I dressed it up, but it was like technically the policy was jeans on Friday, but like every now and again, people would kind of come in with jeans and no one ever really said anything. So over time, I just started coming into jeans. I'm coming in with jeans pretty much all the time. And for a long time, no one said anything at all. So of course I'm thinking everything is good. And then one day my boss calls me in and he's like, we have a policy where people can only wear jeans on Friday. And I'm like, okay, well, that policy isn't enforced. And so, that kind of puts a bad taste in someone's mouth because you're sure, am I the only thing in trouble for this? Or, are you talking to everyone? Are you going to actually enforce the policy? People oftentimes don't know. So with that being said, when you have employees, it's very important to consistently enforce your policies and really build that culture. We want to look at our operations. When you are being inconsistent in your operations, you are inefficient. And there's just no other way to get around it. That means that you either have no systems in place, or most likely that your systems are just too detailed, that it doesn't allow you to be consistent in them because they take too long to get through. So really the idea behind having consistent operations is by being able to simplify your processes, simplify your procedures, and have a simple system in place that allows you to always do the same thing over and over again. And of course that, makes all of your record keeping and your pricing and your delivery of your service, all of that ends up being very seamless once you have a good, simple, consistent process in place. And so then lastly, of course, consistency touches the growth of your business. One of the biggest factors in growing your business is replication. And essentially that's what consistency is. It's replication. So ultimately what I'm stressing here is that being consistent goes hand in hand with being successful, even if you're not the best at what you do. But having that consistency in your products and services, dealing with your customers and dealing with your employees and having those operations in place, all of those things help you to consistently grow and scale your business. So I'm pretty much going to touch on one more main area. I'm going to talk about ways to be consistent. And then we'll kind of wrap this up and just open up for any questions or any comments or anything. I want to just, I guess, touch on this before I get into ways to be consistent. In your business, there are two areas that you just have to be consistent in to continue to grow your business. And I feel like we've touched on it a couple of times, but I can't stress enough. You have to be consistent in the way your business looks. You want to have a consistent look and feel, especially when you're small, so that your brand begins to stick in the mind of your customer. If you are building out, your overall image and your brand, it needs to be inviting, it needs to be professional, and it needs to look the same. If I go on your Twitter and your Facebook page, it should look similar to or mirror your business cards or your website. The same thing if you have a brick and mortar business. If I walk into your business, I should get an overall feel for what your business looks like based off of the way that you have expressed your brand in other places. So oftentimes, if you aren't investing in your branding, just consider what that looks like overall. And the second way is you must be consistent in how you treat your customers. I've said this because ultimately, like I said, it builds up, it either destroys or builds your reputation. And if your reputation is destroyed, it's definitely not impossible to come back from that, but it's hard and it makes you put in a lot of work to try and rebuild your image, rebuild your brand, rebuild your reputation. And especially when you're small. When you're small, that word of mouth travels really, really quickly. So, I might have had a good experience with you and I might tell one or two people. But if I had a bad experience with you, I'm telling everybody. I'm like, don't shop there, don't go there, don't get this. I might leave a review. A lot of reviews get left out of people being angry. So you have to be consistent in those areas to build your business. So I am going to close out this call. I feel like it's a lot of information, but being consistent is such a key and a key component, or that cornerstone to building out your business, that I feel like I just wanted to make sure that we touched on just understanding what consistency is, the power of being consistent. And then really, kind of looking into making sure we have a really solid understanding of how consistency touches like every area of your business. So it's so important, it's so key to stay consistent. So let's talk about how to be consistent, because as I mentioned earlier, it can really touch in on that mental, that physical, and that emotional cord with us is how we get to being consistent in something. 9 times out of 10, we don't have any real intention. There's no malice when we start something and we don't finish it out. So oftentimes, stopping a business or giving up on something, there's that it takes a toll on us. And a lot of that just comes from not really having the right information on how to be consistent. So the first thing I want to talk about is building a habit. I feel like this is the number one, this is the most key point about being consistent. In that, I want to start off with saying that it is a myth, a complete fabricated myth, that it takes 21 days to build a habit. So let's just push all of that out. Whatever you've heard about habit formation, building a habit taking 21 days, not true. There is some research on that when I put out this blog about consistency, I will see if I can find that research and drop it just for anyone who's interested. But again, total myth, does not take 21 days to build a habit. So let's talk about what it does take to build a habit. First, you have to establish a routine. When you have established that routine, or when you have identified what habit it is that you're wanting to build. So I'm going to use a basic one that we all know. So let's say we're going to work on our dental hygiene. We know we have to brush our teeth every morning when we get up and at night, but let's just focus on it on the morning. So you have to get up and you have to brush your teeth. When you're building a routine, the first thing is to know what that trigger is. The trigger to your routine is getting up in the morning, right? So you've gotten up in the morning, you're going to go in and you're going to brush your teeth. All right. So what you're going to go through at first is you're really excited about how great this is going to be. Your teeth are going to be fabulous. They're going to be so white. It's just going to be wonderful. Okay. So the first thing that you have to do is you're going to go through that honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase is exactly what it sounds like. We're all excited. We just know that our smile is going to be fabulous after this, and we're excited to make this happen. Then you're going to go through the fight through phase. The fight through phase is probably the biggest, most important part of just understanding what this looks like. There's going to be days you wake up and you're going to be running late and you're thinking, I'll just rinse out my mouth with some mouthwash, or I'll grab a mint. But you can't do that. You have to fight through and complete your task. Or maybe you say, I'm going to wake up and I just don't feel like it. I just don't feel like dragging myself into the bathroom this morning. So I'm just going to skip it for today. You have to fight through that feeling or that phase, right? And I know this is like totally gross because I'm using, dental hygiene as this example, but just work with me. Just follow me here. You have to fight through that phase. Once you fight through that phase consistently for a period of time, and that period of time really just depends on you, then you see it become a habit. That fight through phase, there's really no tips to get through it. There's nothing you can do but fight through it. You're gonna wake up, you just don't feel like doing it, but you have to remind yourself of what the end goal is that I am building a habit. And if I skip it, I'm gonna start all back over, and I'm gonna have to, it's gonna be harder the second time around, or the third time around, or the fourth time around. So you have to fight through that phase so that you can build your habit. Now, here's what you have to be aware of, is that there are things that will knock you off of your routine once you have it established, that can put you back into the fight through phase. That's the part that you have to really take into consideration, is what happens when I went on vacation and I forgot my toothbrush. So now I'm just not going to worry about it for a week. Now I'm back in town and I need to start going back and brushing my teeth every morning, but I have to start all over again because I've now gotten out of the habit. So there are those things that will come up that will push you back into the fight through phase. And so again, this is literally a mental push that you have to make for yourself to get through it, knowing that once it becomes a habit, you won't even think twice about it. So the first way to being consistent is building a habit. The second thing that I'm gonna go with here is to plan out your day. Having a list helps you stay focused on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so it allows you to look at other things that may pop up and say, okay, this isn't on my list. I can't deal with this right now. This isn't on my list. I need to, push this aside. So there are benefits in that aspect to building a list and really having your day planned out, or your to-do list, and planning out your day. So the third way to stay consistent is visualization. I cannot underestimate the power of visualization. There are studies that are done on visualization that talks about how, let's say, a bodybuilder will visualize what it looks like for them to pick up that weight. And in their mind, the same muscles and the same synapses that are happening when they are physically picking up the weight is actually happening when they are visualizing themselves picking up the weight. So if you are visualizing yourself doing or completing a task, or sticking it out, or creating this habit and this routine, then the same things that are happening when you are doing that task is also happening when you're visualizing that task. So taking a moment and visualizing what it is that you're trying to accomplish helps your brain to start working that out in real life. It starts to help that become go from basically from a theory, let's say, to application. So visualization, cannot stress that enough. Then you have so then I'll talk about taking breaks, especially with things like social media and how many images and things like that are getting pushed. There are studies that are coming out talking about how our attention span is becoming shorter. So taking breaks really helps you to stay on track. If you try and focus on something for 2 and 3 hours, you're most likely going to work slower than if you took a 5 or 10 minute break every hour, or every half hour, if that's where you're finding your weak points to be. So taking some self-reflection into account, watch yourself as you go through your day and see how long are you able to stay focused on a task before you start to break focus and start to take breaks, regular breaks during that time. That is going to help you stay focused and complete your tasks. So we have building habits, planning your day, visualization, the use of visualization, taking breaks, and last, minimizing your distractions. That is really key. Put that phone on do not disturb. Stay off of social media, even though I advertise this call on social media. Stay off of social media, stay off of email. When you are trying to get through a task, when you are trying to build a habit, when you are trying to stay consistent in an aspect of your business, or dealing with a customer, stay focused, minimize those distractions. So last time, the ways to stay consistent: build habits, plan your day, visualize, take breaks, and minimize your distractions. So that is all I have for you on this call. I do, again, hope that this call is helpful in how you build out your business. I'm going to open up the call. I'm going to take everyone off of mute and open up the call for anyone if you have any questions, if you have any comments, and I will just throw out there again, I do these calls for free on the third Tuesday of every month. So yes, so that will be happening. And October, the call will be on customer service. So again, just to just to be clear, on October the 18th, that's the third Tuesday, we will have a call on customer service. So I'm going to now take everyone off mute. You are off mute. And if you want to have any questions, please go ahead. Questions, comments, anything.
This was great. So